Here come the girls. Yeah, they're curious. I think farming involves proceeding with an open mind. And I can think about, well, I might put this crop or I might do that. But when I actually visit the farm, put a boot on the ground, and I see the interaction between the animals, I realize that nature has another surprise in store. I'm Antoinette Goodrich, farmer of Laughing Water Farm. The river is the northernmost boundary of the farm, and it's what drew us here. Somehow we found ourselves making the jump to buy the farm, and that's when we began to develop a viable farm philosophy that would be based on the love of the land and the river and wanting to protect it. When we try to think about what we grow, it's informed by our view of the farm as nature. And so we try to be as diverse as possible. So we have chickens, ducks, turkeys, cows, pigs, lambs, goats, donkey, sheep. And then with the vegetables, we pretty much try to grow everything that we'd like to eat and enough to share with our neighbors at farmers markets. We like a diversity of animals, and animals have different palates. So by putting them together, we get a much more thorough management of all the plants. At very first, we thought absolutely we would not have cattle. One of my neighbors at first said, well, Antoinette, you may not need cows, but your farm does. And it was as we began to keep an open mind and to do a little bit of research of the impact of the cattle that we realized that if we were to properly graze cattle, we could sequester more carbon on the grass than we could if we planted it all in trees. And that was sort of a turning point. And so the cows come in. Sometimes I refer to them as our cow tenders because they're such important workers on the farm. They can take this mountainous rocky land and graze around all the rocks and convert that into a very high quality protein. Their grazing activity and then the redepositing of the unused nutrients back on the ground, that stimulates the plants to grow more, and it keeps those nutrients right here. Well, the grass does a lot of things. For one thing, it holds the soil, and that's a big part. And then also, it's a perennial crop that doesn't require tilling or disturbing the soil, because underneath the soil, there's a myriad of life going on. And as we learn more about it, we try to farm with view of the things seen and unseen. There's something very enticing about freshly plowed ground, and it's very inviting because it's like, oh, there's potential here, and it seems like the right thing to do. But there are communities within the soil that need respect, and tilling breaks those up. It opens it up to air and it oxidizes quicker so that the nutrients aren't held as tightly, and then it's more open to erosion. If you leave soil tilled and you have a nice rain, you can see rivulets cut through and you can see actual loss of topsoil. And it can happen just overnight. So breaking that ground is losing ground, and we don't want it to end up in the river. Well, I have to say I was gardening organically, and some of the ramifications of the chemicals are a little beyond what we know. And as we receive more information, we realize the importance of not disturbing the ground. It's always a challenge because you're doing a dance with nature, and nature is the leading partner. There's no question about that. This year's challenge has been an organic no-till experiment to try and do that with a vegetable crop. This year's was a success. We're tickled to death. But a lot of things haven't worked. And I think that a lot of times those failures are what inform us as long as we are willing to learn from our mistakes. Just in this past year, someone said, farmers are risk takers. And it made me pause for a minute and think, and I thought, well, you know, you're right. We are risk takers. We wouldn't even be farming at all if we weren't willing to fail. Failure, I suppose, is a great educator, and I'd say don't be afraid to try, and don't be afraid to learn from people who think differently than the way you might think, because I've found that there's not anybody that I can't learn something from, including the cows. They can teach quite a lot. and I expect to be farming a little differently each year. And a little better, I hope.